Hello, and welcome to History 153, Borderlands and World History with Professor Roll. This is just a quickly put together short lecture of sorts that is not particularly polished and isn't particularly scripted out. It's just put together in order to catch up with you all on where we are in the course, and in particular to give you some key information that you need to know for our upcoming second midterm exam. So that's the primary focus of this, is to offer an overview of what you need to know for that exam, when it is, what it's going to cover, how you should best study, and what the kind of key mechanics, practical aspects of the exam are going to be in terms of where you find it, timing, those types of things. So once I provide a brief overview of that key information about the second midterm exam, I am going to pull up some of the key resources that we've been looking at during this COVID-19 time period. As you can see, I'm sitting here in my basement, which is my little office space, recording studio, etc. that I've been using, and I've spent a lot of time on trying to get various audio video lectures produced for this and other courses, including some future courses. But for this one here, I just wanted to keep it real and just chat with you about what's going on. So, second exam. What do you need to know? Well, the most important thing is that this is an online exam that is due no later than 11:59 p.m., 1 minute before midnight, Eastern Standard or Michigan time, this coming Sunday, April 19th. Okay. It is a cumulative exam, which means it does cover all material from the very beginning of our course all the way up until today, April 15th. That being said, it does have a very heavy emphasis on material that has been covered since our first midterm. Okay, so to break this down for you, in terms of material that we have been reading, doing quizzes on, and that we've had covered in lectures, this is what you should focus on in terms of your study. But be aware that it does cover potentially all material from the beginning of the course. So, in terms of reading, we've had a number of online reading plus annotation assignments that have all been made available for you in Parasol. And with the exception of one of these reading assignments, they all are chapters in the David Fry Walls, A History of the World and A History of Civilization in Blood and Brick. So the readings that we've had up until today, every single one that has been assigned on Parasol from March 18th all the way to today, April 15th, all of those readings are fair game for the primary material that's going to be covered on this second midterm exam. So that's everything from Fry's Fort Broken Heart chapter that we had as assigned reading for March 18th, all the way through to today's assigned reading of the epilogue, the final chapter of David Fry's book. But along the way, we also had some reading that was assigned from outside of Fry, and that is by Frederick Jackson Turner, and that's available on Parasol. It's extracts from his famous 1890s essay called The Significance of the Frontier in American History. So if you have particular readings you want to look at and review that material, it's everything that has been assigned on Parasol from the 18th of March all the way through today. So everything Fry and Frederick Jackson Turner related on Parasol. Okay, quick little note, because I'm down in my basement, we also, this is where the furnace is located, and I can hear right now that the furnace is about to kick in, so that might affect the audio a little bit. I do apologize. It's crazy. I was out without a coat on just late last week, and woke up to inches of snow. Not only are we having the plague of pandemic, but it seems like we're also having other features of the apocalypse. Okay, so midterm exam, reading everything from Fry's Fort Broken Heart through Fry's epilogue, including the special reading from Frederick Jackson Turner. And all of this is available for you on Parasol. Quizzes. You should expect that nearly all of the questions that you've seen on quizzes 7, 8, and 9. Quiz 9 is the quiz that happens to be due today, April 15th. You should expect that you're going to see all of those questions, maybe in slightly different formats. So if you saw it in the quiz as a multiple choice question, you might see it on the exam as more of like a short answer question. And there will be some questions that do repeat from quizzes 1 through 6. But those are going to be relatively limited, and they should be material that you know quite well. So let's think back about some of those things relating to which Roman emperor was the first to, start building linear frontiers. Hadrian. So think back at about those earlier quizzes, and do spend a little bit of time just glancing through those quizzes as well. But the bulk of the questions that you're going to see are probably going to be repeats of questions from quizzes 7, 8, and 9. And then since we've had our break to online only delivery of this course, we've had pretty much just one lecture, and that is the week 9 audio video lecture on the Maginot Line. Now, there is a quiz that relates to that, and we did have a reading that relates to that in Fry. So there's going to be most of the questions that come from that content will already be included through one of those quizzes, but you might want to spend a little bit of time just reviewing that lecture. So the format of the exam is going to be identical to all the previous Moodle quizzes. So in retrospect, I'm really happy by my decision this semester, the first time I've really done it, to put all of my quizzes in an online Moodle quiz format, because now that we're in an online delivery scenario, this online quiz testing format is familiar to you. So the quiz is going to be identical to the exam is going to be identical to those previous quizzes. We will have multiple choice, ordering, matching, and those short essay questions that you've come to be quite familiar with. In addition to those formats, there will be one required long essay. This is very similar to that essay question that you had at the end of your first midterm exam. And in this particular case, I've got 2 optional topics for you to choose from. You have to pick one of those to write about, because that's going to be worth a hefty chunk of your grade, okay? 40% of your grade for this exam is going to be that one long essay question. Now, I do strongly encourage you to plan and write out this essay in full before you ever launch the exam. There's a few key reasons why you would want to do this. One, it allows you to just copy and paste that essay in. It gives you more time to think about the topic, so you can write the essay without any time constraints of the online Moodle exam. That gives you the ability to write a better essay because you're not constrained by that time. You can actually plan a little bit of it, write up a little bit of it tonight maybe, write a little bit of it tomorrow, and by the time you launch the exam on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, you should be able to have what you think is a pretty rock solid essay that's going to give you as close to that 40 full points as possible. And it saves you the stress of being there in time crunch situation, only having a certain amount of time, having to pull out a cogent, detailed, in-depth essay with that kind of time constraint. So you do not have to pre-write the essay, but I strongly urge you to do so. I think that you will have great results in terms of the points that you receive from the essay if you pre-write it beforehand. Now, in terms of time, when does the exam go live? How much time do you have to work on it? The exam will go live on Friday at noon. That's noon Eastern Standard or Michigan time. And it's going to be due no later than 1 minute before midnight Eastern Standard or Michigan time on Sunday. So you have there basically half or more of the day on Friday, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday. You've got 2.5 days in which you can start the exam. Now, once you launch the exam, the clock does begin ticking for you, though, and you have a maximum of 2 hours in which you can submit it. So don't plan on launching the exam on Friday at noon, seeing what all the questions are, and then logging in on Sunday to complete the exam. That's not going to work for you. What you need to do instead is to get to a point where you feel ready. You have completed your long essay. You've had a chance to look at, review previous lecture material on the Maginot Line. You've had a chance to look at and review previous quizzes, particularly quizzes 7, 8, and 9. And then when you are all ready, launch the exam. At that point, you have up to 2 hours to submit everything. But given the fact that it's online, it's mostly questions that you've seen before. You've had a chance to pre-write your essay. It shouldn't take most of you anywhere near that amount of time to complete the exam. So, what are those 2 long essay options? Well, the first is all about Frederick Jackson Turner and Turner's American Frontier thesis. So this is the essay topic or question as you will see it on the exam. Frederick Jackson Turner argued that the frontier experience transformed settlers from Europeans into Americans. So in your own words, summarize Turner's explanation of this process and offer a critical evaluation of Turner's argument. Specifically here, to what degree is Turner right, and what are the limitations of his thesis? Okay, so this is not just a copy and paste from our extracts of Frederick Jackson Turner. It's you actually having read Frederick Jackson Turner, you've thought about, you've digested, you feel that you can summarize in your own words how he says that should work. Do feel free to quote little bits of Turner if you want to, but this must be written largely in your own words. Tell me, using your own words, what Turner's main argument is and how he explains the way that the process of Europeans transforming into Americans takes place. And then once you've offered that summary, offer a critical evaluation. Think about it. Is Turner right? Is Turner wrong? Is he partly right? And if he's partly right, in what ways is he right? And in what ways is he not quite right? And in what ways is he dead wrong? So I really want you to be thinking about this. Be sure that you can summarize what he had to say and that you can actually think through the argument and critically evaluate it. So that's long essay option A. The second long essay option is as follows. Border defenses of our contemporary world follow a tradition that can be traced back thousands of years. And each border, frontier, or wall, though, is a product of particular historical contexts. For this essay, pick 2 borders or walls, one of which must be ancient and one of which must be modern, and offer a comparison and contrast. Your answer should cover both why each border or wall was built and a summary of its structural design, along with a discussion of how the historical circumstances in which both of these were being built and designed affect any similarities and or differences. So for example here, an ancient border or wall that you can choose would be Hadrian's Wall, the Antonine Wall, the Great Wall of China. And the modern border frontier that you can choose might be something like the French Maginot Line, the Berlin Wall, the wider defense walls that separate Eastern and Western Germany, the Israel-Palestine West Bank Wall, or the Wall of Apartheid, the Wall of Occupation, depending on how you want to refer to that. We've read about a number of different borders and frontiers, walls of the contemporary world, 20th century, 1900s, and today, 21st century. So in this particular essay, you pick an ancient border and frontier, you pick a more modern border wall, and you offer a comparison and contrast. Be sure that you offer a brief summary of where, when, why, how it was designed for both of those, and then end with a discussion where you start to look at what are the similarities and differences and how do specific historical circumstances that are involved with both of those affect the similarities and or differences. Okay, so that's basically what you need to know for the second midterm exam. It takes place this weekend. It starts on Friday. You can launch it as early as noon Eastern Standard or Michigan time. It takes place on Moodle. You must complete it no later than 1 minute before midnight on Sunday, April 19th. That's 1 minute before midnight Eastern Standard or Michigan time. And at any point in that window, once you launch the exam, you have a maximum of 2 hours in which to complete it. The exam will be cumulative. There will be some knowledge questions that you have seen on previous quizzes 1 through 6, primarily emphasizing those that you previously saw again on your first midterm exam. But most of the questions will relate to material that we've had since that first midterm. That's the material that we have been covering since we moved to this online-only format. So those particular readings from David Fry's book, starting with the Fort Broken Heart chapter and ending with the epilogue, also including the reading that we've had from Frederick Jackson Turner, available on Parasol as well. There has been one audio-video lecture that might be further information might be pulled from. That's the audio-video lecture I provided in week 9 on the Maginot Line. And you have, again, those 2 long essays that you you should choose one of those topics and write about one of them. I strongly urge you to pre-write that, plan it out, have it ready to go, so that when you do launch the exam, you can just paste that right into the relevant question. So if you have any questions whatsoever about this, do know that I will be available during our regular classroom time. So that is from 11:30 to 12:20 on Friday, overlapping with the start time for the midterm. So if anybody wants to chat with me on Microsoft Teams during that period, I'm happy to do that. So now let's just take a quick look at some of the key material that we have in Per Us All. Okay, so here I am in Per Us All. I am looking here, and we've got a reading here from March 18th on Fort Broken Heart. March 23rd, we've got a reading from Frederick Jackson Turner. March 30th, we had the readings about the last battles. April 1st, we had the readings about A Hell of a Lot Better Than a War. And for today, April 15th, we've got the epilogue. Love your neighbor, but don't pull down your hedge. So Fort Broken Heart, this was really all about South, Central, and North America, about the prehistory of the New World, all the way up until AD 1800. And a lot of this talked about the relationships between Western European settlers, explorers, and the natives. So we learned about the French explorer La Salle, and about this fort that he built, Fort Broken Heart. And the conflict that arose between these French explorers and the Native Americans. We learned a little bit about how the New World had a way of turning everything upside down, that there are no walled sanctuaries where one might escape the brutality, the trophy killings, or the endless cycles of vengeance, and everywhere was war. There's this idea that these Europeans had moved from their kind of civilized societies to the savage, uncivilized areas of the New World. As Fry goes through this, he begins to talk a little bit about how that image of the New World isn't entirely accurate, and that we did in fact have in the New World numerous prehistoric, pre-European colonization civilizations that were present here. And he talks particularly here about the Maya, whose cities had certainly seen better days, but who could look back at their own, kind of classical antiquity. They who had written in hieroglyphics, who had built cities and pyramids, and developed their own fine systems of math and astronomy, who had developed walled cities as well. So even there in South America, in Peru, we have the Inca, the Moche, the earlier civilizations of the Andes. So be sure that you spend some time looking at this particular chapter here to understand a little bit more about the way that prehistoric New World societies had or had not used walls, how their particular way of life might reflect or be very different from those societies that we've seen from the old world. So do the New World societies fit into the category of wall builders, or do they fit into the categories of the warriors, the nomads, for whom most of those previous civilizations of the old world had built walls against, according to Fry's hypothesis? We then also looked at Frederick Jackson Turner and his American frontier thesis. And here we've got some extracts from it. I'm just going to zoom in here. So Frederick Jackson Turner, up until probably the 1970s, the most influential of all American historians. In 1893, he wrote and presented this essay called The Significance of the Frontier in American History, and he read it in Chicago at the Columbia Exposition, or the World's Fair. And he started out by referencing a very recent document, the United States Census, which had said up to and including 1880, the country had a frontier of settlement. But at present, the unsettled area has been so broken into by isolated bodies of settlement that there can hardly be said to be a frontier line. Basically, what Turner was responding to was, by the end of the 1800s, a decade before the end of the 1800s, the United States government had reported that there was no longer a frontier in America. That the Wild West was now all American. There was no kind of unsettled area. Or where there was unsettled area, these were just all kind of pockets of unsettled area in between settled civilized space. And Turner took this as an opportunity to think about what was the significance of the frontier as the American people, or really as European settlers came to the New World, to what became the United States of America, and continuously pushed further and further west from the Atlantic coast westward. And we saw American kind of civilized, or to use that term civilized, or more European colonial, European settlements began shifting further and further west. The frontier moved. And what was the significance of that? How did that shape what America is? Politically, geographically, on the map, it clearly shaped it because it kept growing and growing and growing and growing. But how did it shape us as Americans, as people, as individuals, and as a larger society? And this is a key element of Turner's discussion here. Turner's primary argument is that the American frontier experience was like a was like a melting pot. It was like a crucible in which metal is put, and metal is melted down, and then metal cools down and becomes something new. That you have all of these people coming from all these different Western European countries moving to America, going out into the wild, unsettled spaces, almost having to revert to a form of primitiveness, and in the process becoming something totally different, and from Turner's perspective, absolutely something better than the old Europeans that they were. Turner argues that it was the American frontier experience that created the unique American outlook, the American way of life, etc. So spend some time looking through this. Pay attention to the wave approach that Turner has in describing the frontier, and think about the ways in which Turner's frontier, as this kind of ever-moving line, relates to some of those borders, frontiers, and walls that we've looked at in the future. In the past. So, one of the key things that I would say is that this idea of an ever expanding frontier, wave after wave after wave, moving further and further out, is very similar to that idea that Rome had from that period of late Republican expansion when it became an empire with a lowercase e, all the way up until the point when that idea of frontier was totally transformed into a permanent line marked out by those walls that Hadrian and Antoninus Pius had built. Think about that. Think about the ways in which Turner talks about free land, unsettled areas, and the ways in which he is grossly overlooking the fact that hundreds of thousands of Native Americans actually lived in those territories. Think about the ways in which he talks about the meeting point between savagery and civilization, and the effect that it has had on Americans' ideas about Native Americans, and about other people, other non-Americans as well. We then had chapter on the last battles, which talked about the rebuilding of walls, or the use of walls and frontiers in the post-war period between World War I and World War II in China and France. And we spent most of our time talking about the Maginot Line. And be sure that you spend some time looking at the Maginot Line lecture that I produced, and the quiz 8 questions that relate to the Maginot Line as well. And finally, in terms of the assignments, pay attention here to the epilogue. The epilogue here is what brings us beyond the time of Frederick Jackson Turner into the 1900s, and all the way up to today. We can learn a little bit about how from the time of the Berlin Wall falling, the end of the Cold War, there was this idea that we were entering this new borderless society, but after the events of September 11th, 2001, we entered a new period, what Fry calls the second age of walls, when we've hit a point where we now have more border walls than at any point in the past, the human past, as far as we know. And that we have, not just, complex linear fortifications, but that we have razor wire, motion sensors, electrified fencing, remote controlled trucks with machine guns, and that borders and these walls designed to protect are being ever more sophisticated. We learned a little bit in this chapter about how even politically, American politics' relationship to how to deal with immigration, mass immigration, illegal, undocumented immigration on the U.S.-Mexico border has been problematic. Hasn't actually been that consistent. How we had lots of work and lots of political rhetoric by Democrats and Republicans supporting the building of border fences on the U.S.-Mexico border, and that there's something new, something different about President Trump's discussion of a big, beautiful wall. What are the differences? Why are some people against Trump's wall but were for border fences in the past? Have their opinions changed? Is it all just politics? Are the historical circumstances different? Is the terminology important? These are things to be thinking about as you read through this particular chapter as well. I wish you guys all the best as you prepare for this second midterm exam. I look forward to seeing those. And if anybody has any question whatsoever before you take the exam, know that on Friday I will be on Microsoft Teams during our regular classroom time. Stop in there, we'll have a chat. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks so much, and good luck.